Alex Gyllstrom. How you doing, man?
Tony Peterson, I'm doing well, buddy.
We are
It,
sitting here for our second Facebook Live of Project Public 2.0 for North American Whitetails social media feeds, and we are chatting a little bit about what has happened to us so far in the deer season and what we hope will happen in the next 3 weeks. And so maybe we should do a little recap here, Alex.
yeah.
Where have you been so far?
So much like the most of America, I work a day job too. Lucky enough to work in the hunting industry, but for the large portion of October, especially, I'm kind of a weekend warrior. I'll try to get out here before the daylight savings time changes and hunt evenings and stuff like that too. But I've been hanging around home in Illinois for the first, couple weeks of the season, or week and a half of the season here, and just kind of really trying to bide my time and be efficient as I can, and just kind of watch the weather. And luckily, we had a really nice cold front last weekend, so I was able to get out just a little bit here at the end of last week into the weekend and get a little hunting in. But just been sticking close to here.
And what have you seen so far?
So I did see some really good movement. My strategy for the early season, as it pertains to the Midwest, is, especially here in Illinois, is if I can time a good cold front, which luckily we had, key in on those times, and then I try to push a little bit deeper than I think a lot of people generally think. It's always great to key in on acorns. We had a lot of rain in the spring, so heavy acorn year. It's been a good acorn drop, and a lot of deer activity in the acorn flats. But instead of setting up on those, I try to push in just a little bit further to that security cover, even on the edge of some bedding, and just because even though you get a good cold front, even though we had a 20-degree drop at the end of last week, and I saw two good bucks, but they were, even at that point, they still didn't move until a half an hour before dark. They're just not getting to those places until after dark, especially on public when you're having hunting pressure. And it's just the weather. It's just hot. So I snuck down into this little bottom in the CRP. It was a couple hundred yards from a really nice primary acorn flat that had a bunch of the deer sign was loaded. There was a bunch, you could tell they were in there, but I knew the importance of just continuing to push in a little bit further. Got set up on a great transition area between a CRP, and then actually there was a kind of a secluded ridge of oaks that kind of came up on top, and just had a really great hunt. Saw a 2-year-old 10-pointer that was a beautiful deer. He was definitely, you would have shot him for sure. But it was still pretty early, and I was like, I'm gonna hold out a little bit, and then luckily I did. I saw down in the CRP there was this kind of little cluster of thick brush, and just about 45 minutes before dark, a big deer actually stood up out in the CRP field, and he kind of browsed around a little bit and then headed off towards this creek that was along this bottom. And I've set up along that creek before. The reason I didn't do that in my first initial sit was two reasons. One is the acorns. There's tons of acorns behind me, so I wanted to be kind of somewhat close to that secluded acorn flat that I was set up on. But two was, always thinking about how the deer are utilizing the wind to their advantage and how you can give that advantage to them, but still be, obviously you're still trying to set up for it so they don't wind you and it's advantageous for you. And I actually predicted he would work the transition line I was set up on up into the cover to go up into the oaks, and big deer just being big deer just moved off the other way and got away from me. But and then it was kind of like a typical like October cold front, right? So a really, really good the night of the front, which was last Thursday evening, Friday evening, day 2 of the front, temperature still held, pressure was falling, but not whatever. It wasn't, rising like it was Thursday, but then that's when I made an adjustment. I was like, okay, well, I have the same wind as I had Thursday. If I get in the creek, work up the creek for great access, I can get in super quiet and super clean and set up to about where I think, if this deer's in this general area again and he works this creek bank, I should be in really good position. Didn't see a deer that night. So it was one of those really weird, like no squirrels, no birds, it was just dead silent almost. I think there was like a 3-mile-an-hour wind. So in a nutshell, that's really been the long and short of my season. I've scouted a little bit, a couple of evenings other than that, just kind of trying to take some inventory and observe and sit back and observe some areas a little bit. But in terms of like actual getting an eye on deer and spending some time in the stand, that's been pretty much it for me so far in this early early season. But you had some luck out in Nebraska.
Yeah, I have a different strategy than you and a lot of people. I don't. I hate hunting when everybody's going to be out, and
Yeah.
the secret's out on the cold fronts. And you proved that you could get on one. You got that buck that you were on was a big one.
Yeah, it was
And
good.
a buddy and I started in Nebraska for the opener. I killed a nice velvet buck, 10-pointer opening night in a spot where I had watched a really good buck go in. My buddy went in there the next night and arrowed that buck. And so we went 2 for 2 in 2 days in there. And his buck, that buck ended up breaking 151 inches.
That's awesome.
Just in full velvet, incredible deer.
Yeah.
And so we had, it was hot. It was 80 degrees when I killed my buck, and it was 90 degrees when he killed his.
Yeah.
And, for us, that just kept people away. I was tagged out and my buddy was hunting. And so I drove around, did some photography, just nothing better to do but wait for him to hunt.
Right.
Do a little scouting. And the public places I looked at that night, I never saw another hunter. No trucks parked, nothing. And it was miserable. It was hot.
Yeah.
But, nobody's out. And so, aside from that being a possibility, hunt when the other people aren't out, the thing that I keep getting reminded of is, you saw a buck that was like a 160 class deer on public land doing his thing, didn't walk in and give you a shot. My buddy killed one 150 class deer on public land. Those deer are out there. There's really, really quality deer. And so, people often think, well, you're going to go to a state with a lot of hunting pressure, and Nebraska doesn't qualify, but Illinois does, that you can't run into a really, really good deer, and you can. Take some work, take some luck, takes a lot of things. But that, other than I, hunted a private place in Minnesota, killed a good one on opening night, went out and burned the rest of my September in Colorado hunting elk on public land, which made public land whitetail hunting in general seem pretty easy.
Yeah, I bet.
So, it's just, we're in a transition phase now. We're going into what I kind of consider a better time than a lot of people, because we look at the lull and everybody goes, oh, I want to wait till the rut. And man, right now, especially with I'm going to North Dakota as soon as we wrap this sucker up, and it's going to be 70 degrees tomorrow where I'm at. And it's going to drop down like 40, 50 degree swing, blizzard coming in, there's warnings. It's going to get real gnarly. So there's going to be deer on their feet.
Absolutely.
There's deer moving ahead of that. There's going to be deer moving, when it's blowing through, if it's super nasty, they might hole up, but things are going to change. There's going to be deer out. And this time of year, you mentioned acorns. I'm not going to find an acorn out there. But what I will look for is a scrape line or fresh scrapes, because this mid-October stuff, I don't care about scrapes a lot of times, but about October 10th through the 20th, I just see so much activity on them. There's something going on. And so, the added bonus of that is you can find them in the cover and find them in the places, I'm not going to sit on any field edges or anything like that out there. It's going to be, like you mentioned, kind of security cover. And so it's a transition time. But if you're a public land hunter and you're skipping out on this time, waiting for something better, man, you're hunting like everybody else is. And, if you have the time, get out there. You might be surprised what you see.
I think you hit the nail on the head too, especially as it relates to like this transition that we're having right now between guys are like a lot of times in the early season we'll think about beans, right? Like they want to find a good bean field where it's lush, they're visiting here if it's alfalfa or whatever. Now they're with the acorn drop, they're starting to see that. And we'll have good acorn, feeding or whatever from now, until the end of the month, and even on if there's enough oaks around. But I really like to key on this time of year on that sign as well. And I think it's a lot of people, I think when they think scrapes and rubs, they're thinking of like setting up and how do I shoot that deer at that scrape, or how do I shoot that deer, like working that rub line. Yeah, sure. That can happen. And it might, might be even a possibility of it happening even better as you get closer to November. But like you said, now looking for that sign, and then in relation, figuring out where that security cover is, how to hunt, almost like hunting it backward. Like you hunt back to where the deer probably is or coming from, or where you can like draw some conclusions based on the sign you're seeing. So I think that's a great strategy, especially for out where you're going, just to be able to see that sign. And then in relation to the time of the year, okay, it's, mid-October, they're not going to be like tearing everything up necessarily, but how do you backtrack that sign to identify where your best chance of daylight activity is?
Yep. Yeah.
So,
That's I talk about this a lot, kind of reverse engineer the travel routes.
Right.
And early season, we live off of those destination food sources, and now pressure, the hunting pressure's kicked in. If you're in a typical Midwest ag state, things are changing. The harvest seems like it's going to be kind of late this year because it doesn't stop raining.
Right.
That's a wild card. But just generally, the deer seem to have less enthusiasm to go out in the open in daylight. And so you kind of got to back off. And a lot of people like to push the food plot and the field edge program now. And it's just, they've been there, they've seen that, they've done that, they've encountered predators there all, since whatever the opener was. A lot of times it just means backing up. And if you're on public land, it's almost a necessity to do right now.
Yeah, I agree completely. And I think a lot of times too is that, hopefully like you and I hunting public land so much, we've got so many places kind of mapped out, pre-scouted, and kind of already like in our arsenal. And I think like now is a great time to where it's like, don't sit there on the fringe and just kind of hunt consistently, just laying down a bunch of your sign and putting pressure on that fringe area. Don't be afraid to like push into some areas. I'm not saying you got to dive right into the bedding area or anything like that, but hopefully, it's public property. Hopefully you've got enough of them to where you kind of mapped out your, how I personally approach it is I kind of like reserve, okay, these couple locations are going to be for, first 2 weeks in November. These couple locations are going to be, last week of October. This one's going to be great for maybe pushing the envelope that October lull, because, that buck activity is still building. They're still getting their testosterone still building. They're moving more. It's just, they might not be roaming, they're not out roaming necessarily in daylight as much, but they're still getting up at that, that key time toward the end of the day, coming back to bed maybe a little bit later. And I think you can find some really good opportunities just by maybe don't have so much reserve and don't be afraid to dive in a little bit deeper than you normally would, get close to that cover.
Yeah, this is a time. I literally just downloaded my maps from Onyx for the place I'm going to, because with public land right now, I love to do the hang and hunt strategy, the slip in, observe, move in kind of thing that you're talking about. And I know this is one thing that makes it difficult for people on public land. The place I'm going to, I've hunted this more than just about anywhere except maybe northern Wisconsin public land, and it's never the same thing 2 years in a row. And I'm looking at the river out there and the amount of flow. They've had a lot of rain. I don't know if it's going to be crossable or not.
Yeah.
Especially in the weather that's coming in, where it's going to be in the teens at night. I'm not going to be that keyed up to cross a pretty high river in the dark.
Yeah.
So I'm sitting here looking at it going, the place that I killed a buck last year, probably not going to be the place I kill one this year. And so I've got Onyx fired up. I've got my off-grid maps loaded, and backup spots, like you said. So my strategy will be look at the stuff that I know, see if I can pick up on something that I'm familiar with. If that doesn't happen, I've got about 4 waypoints that are like, okay, plan B, plan C, plan D. And I just know, even as much as I want it to be as the same as it has been in the past, it won't be.
Right.
And then you throw in the pressure and who's out there and who's been hunting where, and just giving yourself options. I think that the biggest problem we have with public land hunting a lot of times is, if you come from a private land situation or you just don't have a lot of experience, it's really easy to kind of hone in on one spot or one stand site, or I like hunting this place.
Yeah.
If you don't give yourself options, you're just selling your opportunities so short.
Absolutely. I could not agree more. I mean, I call it like spot checking, right? Like, so even you just have all these places identified, and even if it's just a matter of walking in, it's actually funny we're having this conversation. One of my best friends is actually headed to Southern Illinois for his first out of state public land hunting trip ever. He's from Michigan, and he's kind of asking me kind of how to go about this whole thing. And it's intimidating, and he's looking at maps and he's trying to figure all this out. And I said, the number one thing it said is scout. I said, just look and find the sign. I said, don't even think about setting your tree stand up or hanging a stand and putting a spot up, unless, I mean, if you find a good observation point to watch something, maybe, but like, until you find fresh sign, don't even think about having to sit. I said, I'd rather you come back and tell me a story about how you spent the first 3 days of your trip, not even sitting in a stand, but finding that fresh sign and then having a phenomenal 3-day sit at the end of the week, than saying, well, I found this ridge and I set up for 7 days and I saw 3 deer. Like, that's, I feel like to your point, I feel like some people that just aren't acclimated to it or just not out finding the deer as much, and they just pick a spot on the map and say, well, I'm in the woods, I'm sitting, maybe there's a chance. Well, man, there's so many other things you can do and so many other places you can go. Just keep moving. I think that's a huge thing. I think this time of the year is going through this weird, everybody calls it the lull or whatever, but like this weird transition time of where deer, bucks are becoming more aggressive. They're becoming more secluded and isolated, kind of working away from the groups a little bit and kind of finding where their fall range is going to be. I think staying mobile and finding where that sign is and finding where they are is the most important thing you can do right now.
Yeah. And on that, so don't get married, use your onX, figure out your spots you want to go to, give yourself some options, but understand you probably got it wrong. And don't get married to just one idea of one spot. You got to get in there and see it. And so it sounds like if you didn't know what you were talking about, and I do, you'd be advocating for just walk around till you find fresh signs. This is a targeted thing. Use your aerial photography to identify some spots worth walking into. When you walk in there, know that you might find the spot.
Yeah.
And so do it with a purpose. Don't just go, if you hunt public land a lot, you see people just wandering.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I had a guy walk by me earlier this year in a rainstorm carrying an arrow. He was knocked up. He was ready to shoot one.
Ready to go.
He was covering ground, and have a purpose to it. Understand what you're looking for. Understand that you probably won't get it right every time, but if you give yourself enough options, you'll figure something out. And this is true going to a state like North Dakota, where I'll have glassing points. I have places picked out where I'm going to glass. It's a way easier situation to figure out than if you're, I have people for my podcast reaching out to me from Louisiana and South Carolina and places where you're not going to sit there on a peak and glass 2 miles of river bottom both ways. You're going to have to get in there. And, you can use that aerial photography to find those hard edges and soft edges and creek bottoms and things like that. But until you lay eyes on them, you just don't know what it has in store for you, especially during mid-October.
Yeah. And I think and you're exactly right, is being strategic with your scouting, is not just getting in there and just moving all over the place and blowing stuff up. That's not what we're talking about at all. But I think identifying those really great points, like you said, when you can get elevation to your advantage and have those observations where you can maybe see down in a bottom or look off, definitely take advantage of that. But another thing I know you and I both do a lot too is creeks. I use creek bottom access, especially, man, I get so pumped up when it's got a little bit of water in it, because it just disperses that scent so much. And you just go slow, be quiet, find where those heavy crossings are, and then look. And what I love to do too is pull up my onX map and look at the map as I'm going through it too. They've got that off-grid version. We hunt so many places that are terrible cell phone coverage, but you can pull up that off-grid version and look at your surroundings as you're kind of going, so you can start identifying, okay, here's where bedding might be in relation to this kind of travel. Here's where this food, the food source might be in relation to this kind of travel. And you can start honing in on those big, broad areas and start dissecting them down even further by utilizing that aerial photography that you're talking about. And that's a huge, huge benefit.
For sure. So we've established I'm heading to North Dakota. Where are you going next?
So I'll be in Illinois, possibly Missouri, till the end of the month, and then I'm heading out to South Dakota for a week at the very end of October, into the first couple of days of November.
Okay, yeah, I'm gonna hit this up. I gotta be home. I'm told by next Sunday by the warden,
by the boss.
But I've got it. When I get home, I've got a few places I've been scouting in northern Wisconsin, and since I have 2 bucks and a bull elk in the freezer, I'm setting my sights on a good one in northern Wisconsin, which is something that has eluded me on public land for about 10 years now. So I'm getting after it with a little bit of a vengeance. So we're gonna have you'll be hunting Illinois in a traditional ag heavy kind of area. I'll be switching from western whitetails, essentially western whitetails. You can dang near see Montana from where I'm going to be,
right, to
some real big woods stuff. And I know people ask us a lot about big woods, and they're looking for help there because a lot of times you can't count on the water there because there's water everywhere.
Yeah.
You can't count on destination food sources because there's no dreamy bean field. And I'm under the impression, obviously I haven't hunted everywhere, but it is pretty hard to find a more difficult situation to arrow a big buck than the big woods. So we'll be covering that and
Yeah.
hopefully picking up something in the rut that's cruising through. We should give a shout out to we've got some partners for Project Public. We've got Onyx, awesome service. If you're not using it, it's killer.
Yeah.
Got Sitka gear. I have 2 duffels loaded with 2 different kinds of outfits for this trip.
I was going to ask you about that. What your clothing arrangement's going to be for this weather that's coming your way.
If I'm being honest, it sucks because I've got such a spectrum covered where
Yeah.
I've got, some lightweight subalpine stuff that I wore elk hunting, because if I sit on the ground and I'm just covering ground scouting, and then I have some heavy elevated freeze your butt off weather type of clothing. And so
Yeah.
I actually put together an entire extra duffel of clothes that I wouldn't normally bring, but the variation in temperature, from the highest highs to the lowest lows this coming week, there'll probably be a 70-degree swing.
Jeez, man.
Somewhere in there, 60 degrees, but a lot. And we're camping,
Yeah.
so it's just going to be cold anyway.
I was going to say, you better have a Fanatic ready to go. If you're looking at snow, that's nuts.
Yeah, it's that kind of hunting. Because there's nothing else to do. It's not like I come back to camp, there's nothing to do, so I'll hunt all day. And this is not hunt all day time typically, but nothing else to do. And so you really start to understand the importance of a layering system, because most of the places I have to hike to will be a mile to 3 miles probably. And, carrying in stands, carrying in enough stuff to sit for an entire day, and just managing that heat and exertion level to get in, then sit all day in that cold, and it's going to get windy, so it's going to be rough, and then get out. It takes a good system. And so
Yeah.
I got every layer packed that you can bring. And the last thing, we've got Ozonics partnered with us this year. I've been using their stuff a long time. That's one of those products I wanted to hate and I wanted to disprove. And I spent when the original came out, I spent 2 seasons on public land here in the Twin Cities using it, and just I couldn't beat it. I couldn't believe it. And so then I tested. My other world is bird dogs, and I got a dog sleeping right next to me who's a rock star. And so I tested ozone against my dog to see if I could beat my dog's nose. And it's one of the few scent control products out there where I could beat a really well-bred, really well-trained black lab. And so I've got, depending on the situation, I'll use it to treat my clothes to give myself an upper hand, because I'm going to be in a camp. I don't have any other way to do it very well.
Right.
But awesome products there. So those 3 companies have partnered up with us, and we use them a lot on these hunts.
Yeah, I agree. And it's where I've really found it to be a game changer is not, and obviously great applications in the field, and you're going to see great success with it too, but is in storage for your gear and clothing. I mean, that's because you don't have access to a washing machine. You don't have access to, a washer, dryer, whatever. Being able to cycle your stuff through your storage bags or your totes and things like that to stay as fresh as you possibly can, and literally oxidize those odor molecules that build up on your stuff. It's really changed the game to be able to, man, you're not out there smelling like a big scent bomb out there. It's a huge advantage, especially for traveling.
Yeah, it is. And you're talking those creek bottoms and those light variable winds and stuff. I don't use it when the wind's blowing 35 miles an hour in one direction, because I just play that.
Yeah.
When you get into those bottoms, and I love hunting those creek bottoms, and you got that 5 miles an hour one way and 7 mile, the other way. Project Public is located on North American Whitetails, Instagram feed, Facebook. We're throwing some stuff in the magazine if you check that out. You and I are gonna do a little wrap-up podcast for my Hunt for Real podcast when this is all over, and we'll really get into depth on that. But anybody that wants to follow can check it out on North American Whitetail social feeds. We're gonna be posting all kinds of updates here. We're gonna really be getting after it in the next probably 6-7 weeks.
Yep.
So if you kind of want to follow along to a semi-live hunt and see how we're doing, the ups and downs, we're going to post it all. Check us out. We want to just, I want to thank you for being a part of it. I want to thank Layden for getting out of the way on this one, letting us have our own discussion. Because I don't know where Layden Force, our publisher, is. I think he got scared off or something. He's off on a guided hunt. I'm not sure.
He probably is. Yeah, it's some big ranch somewhere.
That seems about right. But I want to thank anybody who's following along, anybody who's reached out to us. The response to this has been incredible. And our goal all along was just to show that if you work hard on public land, you can have a great hunt. And public land is a resource that we all have access to in one form or another. And if you love whitetails and you want to hunt, it's just such a good option.
Yeah, I mean, and for sure, anybody out there that's following along, and we encourage everyone to use the hashtag. It's just hashtag Project Public. We want to see the content you guys are seeing, whether it be a video, photos, whatever deer, whatever success you're having. I mean, it's, the term trophy hunter definitely does not apply to Tony or myself. And we want to see whatever you guys shoot, whatever makes you happy, and post it up, use the hashtag, engage with us. We want to follow your guys' stories as much as you're kind of following along with ours. So it's definitely, we're just now turning the page to the really fun stuff. So this is going to be a great few weeks, man.
We are. Thank you, Alex, so much for coming on, and everybody who's listening, thank you so much.
Good luck out in North Dakota, bud.
Thanks, man.